of this year, we set up a call. We put a call for application, not application, but interest for people to join us for the consultations of the theme of the year. And we received over 900 applications, registrants to join us for this call. So the format of this series of consultations is a bit different from the previous years. We wanted to have this group of 900 registrants interested in the consultations of the theme of the year to be with us for the entire month of April. So we'll be having weekly consultations, and then we'll be having focus group discussions. In fact, we had sent a detailed mail about the modality, the methodology of these consultations. But during the course of today's presentation, we'll be giving you more details. So for today, for now, this may allow request the head of secretariat, Mr. William Kiru, to give you some introductory remarks, and then my colleague, Mr. Bright Sefa, the technical lead on this project, will also give you a short presentation. Later on, I will take you through the methodology, how we'll be going through the entire month of April with the consultations. And we're also planning a detailed, it's dedicated consultation series with the diaspora also, but these things will be giving you more details during the course of this presentation today. So for now, I have the immense pleasure to request Mr. William Kerr of Secretariat to give you a few remarks, and then we'll come to the substantive presentation and methodology of the consultations. Mr. Kerr, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raj, and let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the continent you are connecting from or out of the continent. I want to take this opportunity to first and foremost thank you for making it possible to join us on this important webinar today, as we gather to discuss a theme that resonates deeply within the hearts of our people and the history of our continent. Justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparation. This theme is not just a statement. In fact, it is a clarion call for justice, recognition, and more fundamentally, accountability. The injustices faced by African and people of African descent, stemming from centuries of exploitation, colonialism, and systemic discrimination, indeed remain fresh in our collective memory. As we confront these enduring legacies, we must ask ourselves, how do we heal? How do we ensure that justice is served? How do we restore our dignity and build a future rooted in equity for us all? In our contemporary world, you will agree with me that we continue to face multiple crises that further complicate our quest for justice. Climate change, for instance, has disproportionately affected African nations. It has exacerbates poverty, food insecurity, and displacement. In fact, the very communities that we have contributed the least in terms of global emissions, we suffer the most from the consequences of environmental degradation. Therefore, the call for reparation must include accountability for those who have historically contributed to this crisis, ensuring that African nations receive the support needed to adapt and thrive in an increasingly uncertain world. Furthermore, the existing financial architecture often leaves African nations burdened by debt while limiting access to fair and equitable financing for sustainable development. In fact, this cycle perpetuates inequality and hampers our ability to invest in critical services that can uplift our communities. And therefore, reparation must also encompass a re-evaluation access to fair and equitable financing for sustainable advocating, especially from a civil society front. This for reform cycle perpetuates inequalities and hampers our ability to invest of African nations in critical services. And therefore, reparation and prioritize must also encompass reparation while limiting access to fair and equitable financial for sustainable advocating, especially from a civil society front. Many do this for reform speaking perpetuate inequalities. They encompass acknowledgement of historical wrongs, restoration of dignity should be afforded to every African and persons of African descent, wherever they may reside. It is also important to note that civil society organizations play a very critical role in this endeavor. You are the voice of the people, the advocates for the marginalized, and the champions for justice. And therefore, your expertise in grassroots mobilization, advocacy, and policy recommendation is indispensable as we work harmoniously towards this lofty objective. Through your efforts, we can highlight the urgent need for reparation and ensure that our voices are amplified at both national and at the international level. As a people-centered African Union, the Union believes that our citizens must actively participate in shaping the policies that affect their lives. And therefore, it is imperative that we encourage our communities that we come from to articulate their views on this pivotal theme. We must foster an environment where our people feel empowered to express their beliefs, recommendations, and vision for a just and equitable future. This is precisely why the African Union Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, as an organ of the people, is taking a lead in facilitating this consultation across the continent. We must engage collectively, utilizing a platform like this to gather insights and recommendations that will guide our policy recommendation on reparation at the end of the day. So throughout this year, we will seek to forge an alliance with you all as civil society organizations, with governments, academic institutions, the private sector, to ensure that our plans for justice and comprehensive, inclusive, and actionable in terms of the policy recommendation that we will get out of this consultation. Let us move forward with a resolute spirit, united in our commitment to justice for Africans and people for African descent. May this year serve as a turning point in our journey towards reparation, a year where we not only reflect on our past, but also honor our collective aspirations and dreams. In closing, I want to take this opportunity to invite each one of you to see this as a golden opportunity to contribute to this essential discourse. Let your voices resonate throughout our continent and beyond. We have set out the timeline for a number of consultations, and we are kickstarting it today. We want to engage with you so that you are part of the decision and the solution that we will propose to our various member states. We can pave the way for a future where justice is not a distant ideal, but a lived reality for every African and persons of African descent. And therefore, I want to call on you all to be active and participate in this very important dialogue And let's see how we can take leadership as African civil society organization in providing policies, input into the policy programs of the African Union. I want to wish you a very successful deliberation, and we do look forward to your active participation, your expertise, and your input, so that together at the end of the day, we'll produce a document or a policy document that will have a sense of leadership and a sense of ownership by African citizens. I want to thank you, and I will be on the call to be part of this interaction. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Raj.
Thank you, Mr. Head of Secretariat. Thank you for these quick remarks. As I was saying, we'll be having today is the inaugural session where it's mostly that we set the tone, contextualizing the theme of the year. You will find that we are having so many deliberations, discourses about the theme of the year since the start of 2025 on the issue of reparation. But it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Bright Sefa, the technical lead on this project, particular project at the Ecosoc Secretariat. He will give you a bird's eye view about the theme of the year, the rationale, why the theme of the year, and then after that one, we'll also present to you the methodology of these consultations. So without much ado, let me invite Mr. Bright Sefa for his presentation. Mr. Sefa.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raj, for this, and good morning from my side, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may find yourself. It is quite refreshing to see the number of people we have on this particular call, showing the interest of African people in this particular AU theme. And we are also quite happy to work with you on this particular theme and see how best we can all support where we find ourselves and within our member states also in terms of the implementation of the year. The theme of the year on reparations hasn't been one that just started from 2 days or 3 days ago, but rather quite significant amount of work which has been done in the past 3 to 4 years by the African Union to put together some ideas and also agree on such an important theme that we do believe that Africans would need to take opportunity of in terms of its implementation as well. Again, this happens to be one of the very few times that our member states have accepted, agreed to spend political capital and diplomatic capital on such a controversial topic. I do believe that its implementation touches on some very sensitive issues around the world. And by the time we finish implementing this particular theme, I do believe that we will all be on an appreciable level and see ourselves much, much more involved in its implementation. That said, I would want to go into the presentation that I have to try and then give a bit of context to the discussions that is going to take place today so that we are all on the same page in terms of its implementation. But when we talk about reparations and justice for Africans and people of African descent, what specifically are we looking at? We are looking at addressing the historical and systematic oppression caused by colonialism, transatlantic slavery, and racial discrimination. It acknowledges the long-term social, economic, and political impacts of these atrocities on African nations and their diaspora. This process involves acknowledging wrongs and establishing historical truths through documentation, education, and memorialization. In this setting the context, what specifically are we looking at? What exactly are we looking at when we say about this particular narrative here? What are we looking at? We are looking at some of the atrocities that has happened on the continent, which includes slavery of people of African descent and Africans from various walks of lives. We are looking at the trade and trafficking of enslaved Africans from the past. We are looking at colonialism and racial segregation, which have been integral to combating some of the issues that we have faced in the past. And as such, some of these are very important for us to consider in terms of implementing the theme of the year, so that we understand the narrative around the theme as well. From that, we look at what are the key elements of reparatory justice. The key elements of reparatory justice that we are looking at, and where should we situate the discussions around reparatory justice. And we look at reparation of dignity, the dignity of the African, the dignity of the Black race, the people of Africa, and of people of African descent as well. And this will look at addressing dehumanization, promoting cultural reconnection, and returning stolen artifacts that have been taken away from this continent from to many parts of the world. You will go to so many parts of the world, you see artifacts from Africa, and you see those countries benefiting from some of the artifacts that have been taken out of this continent. I do believe that we as Africans do deserve to also benefit from some of these artifacts on the continent, and as such, a repatriation of these artifacts to the continent will be an immense improvement in our economies, among others, and towards improving the cultural sector, among others. And then importantly, the humanization of restoring our dignity. When you look around people, the way Africans are looked at from around the world, I always say when people look at an African and then they say, go back where you come from, they are looking at an African that go back to a terrible place. If we manage to restore our dignity and put ourselves on the right foot, and I do believe it's something that would benefit the continent as well. Compensation economic redress, and I think this is one of the controversial sections of very controversial part of this discussion on reparations as well. Yes, indeed. It will be important that we look at recognition of some of the challenges that we are discussing here. But more importantly, some African countries continue to pay for some of the damages that were caused within this colonial period, as well as some of the injustices that were meted on them, simply for the fact that they demanded for their rights for independence, among others. And as such, they are still at the terrible end of receiving some of these atrocities, as well as when you look at the world global architecture, especially the United Nations systems, you would realize that Africa has not been served well in terms of serving on some of these key positions, and there's a need to restructure some of these systems to address some of the inequalities and the challenges. You may recall that during the speech of the head of secretariat, he talked about climate change and its repercussions on Africa, despite the fact that we contribute very little to some of these climate change issues around the continent. As such, it's a presenting opportunity to see to it that some of these challenges are addressed accordingly, and then we can have a better protected system for us. More importantly, the general United Nations Peace and Security Council as well, where Africa has been trying to have a permanent seat on the United Nations Peace and Security Council. I do believe this also represents an opportunity for us to discuss issues around that as well. Institutional and structural reforms that I've mentioned as well, and then reconciliation and healing. For most people, it does not look, it does not appear to be that important for reconciliation and healing, but to our colleagues in the diaspora, it is one of the most important key elements that there need to be some form of recognition, acceptance that wrongs were made, and through this, people can heal through this recognition. And so these are the four key pillars that we are looking at achieving with the theme of the year. But what are the key actions for achieving reparatory justice? What are the key actions for achieving reparatory justice? Advocacy and awareness, very, very important. And I think this is where ECOSOC, civil society organizations, and other non-state actors also come into the picture. We must use every single platform that is available for us to educate communities via campaigns, workshops, media, and lobbying for reparatory policies, among others. Civil society have led the efforts in developing policies, and I think this is one of the presenting opportunities that we will need to take maximum advantage of. Research and documentation. A lot of questions are being asked about this particular agenda. What specifically can we do? And I do believe we are positioned very well to produce a lot of research and documentations to feed into the information and narrative around the theme of the year as well. And I do believe civil society play a key role as well around here. Legal and policy engagements. Colonialism, slave trade, and stuff were all embedded in legal formulations. Then it was legal because it was backed by laws, and as such, the development of laws now would also support the reparative agenda of the African Union. As such, legal backings will also support us in forming part and parcel of this particular narrative so that we have a proper legal backing in terms of moving this particular agenda. And of course, building global networks. If there is anything that Africans are very known for, it's our solidarity, building solidarity. And Ubuntu is one very good example from this narrative. If we manage to connect Africans and within the diaspora and strengthening our partnerships with civil society and other human rights organizations, I do believe we'll be in a right footing in terms of implementing the theme of the year. Who should be held accountable for these reparations? Who are we looking at? One, we are looking at our former colonial powers and enslaved nations as well. Importantly, and obviously, everyone would know the involvement of the Europeans in slave trade, colonialism, among others. The United States at a receiving end of some of the people that were taken from this continent to work in servitude without remunerations, pays, among others. Western countries that have benefited from African exploitation, including the mineral wealth, among others, from this continent, very key. Slavery and segregations as well should be taken into consideration.